Now, here's something that will shock you. 87% of investors have portfolios that are completely wrong for their financial situation. They're either taking on way too much risk or playing it so safe they'll never build lasting wealth. I've seen people lose years of progress because they picked investments based on what their neighbor was doing instead of what actually made sense for them. Today, I'm revealing the 5-part test that separates smart wealth builders from everyone else. And by the end of this episode, you'll know exactly how to build a portfolio that's scientifically designed for your specific situation. And everyone listening today will have access to my risk number assessment tool. And as a bonus, I'm giving away a complimentary portfolio analysis to the first 10 people who make a comment on this episode and use the words GPA score. My portfolio analysis review powered by Nitrogen Wealth will score your portfolio and assign a GPA number from 2 to 4.3. Now, I don't know about you. I never had a 4.3 grade point average. I might have made the dean's list, but what if your portfolio could have a 4.0 GPA? We'll get into that a little later in this episode. Now, let me tell you about Robert. He's 50. He makes good money as a marketing director, and he thought he was being smart by copying Warren Buffett's portfolio allocation. We all know Warren Buffett's track record, but on paper, this idea looked perfect, but in reality, probably not the right portfolio for him. And here's why. Robert had a risk tolerance score of 55 out of 100 on the Riskalyze platform. This meant he could only handle about an 8% portfolio decline before losing sleep. But Warren Buffett's strategy, that could swing actually 30% or more in bad years. Robert was essentially driving a Formula One car when he needed a reliable sedan. The financial industry loves to sell you cookie-cutter solutions, but here's the truth. There's no one-size-fits-all portfolio. I see a lot of advice on YouTube to buy only these 3 ETFs, or this one fund is all you need. But the reality is your perfect investment mix depends on a lot of different factors. And a lot of people completely ignore the 5 things that I'm going to be discussing today. Now, before we dive deeper, hit a like, make a comment, and if you find value in this episode, hit the subscribe button, because by the end of this episode, you'll have a step-by-step action plan that will transform your investing approach and potentially add hundreds of thousands to your retirement accounts over time. As someone who's helped over 400 clients optimize their portfolios using this exact framework, I can tell you this is how smart wealth builders do it. So let's get into the heart of this episode, the 5-part portfolio test. Part number 1 is risk tolerance. This is the foundation everything is built on. Most people think they know their risk tolerance, but they're usually wrong. Real risk tolerance isn't about how much money you can afford to lose. It's about how much your portfolio can drop before you panic and make terrible decisions. This is where Riskalyze comes in. It's a Nobel Prize-winning platform that measures your actual risk tolerance using behavioral economics. Instead of asking vague questions like, are you conservative? Or are you aggressive? Or are you moderate? It shows you real scenarios. The answers create a risk number score between 1 and 99. And here's what the numbers actually mean. If you have a score between 1 and 20, you need stability above all else. If you're 21 to 40, you can handle some ups and downs for better return. If you're 41 to 60, you're comfortable with moderate volatility. If you're 61 to 80, you can stomach significant swings in your portfolio. And if you're 81 to 90, you're built for maximum growth and maximum volatility. Coming up next, I'll show you the expense ratio mistake that's costing the average investor $120,000 over their lifetime. And it could be happening in your portfolio right now. So this leads me to our first wealth decision principle. Your emotions, not the markets, are your biggest risk. If your portfolio's risk level doesn't match your emotional tolerance, you'll sell at the bottom and buy at the top every single time. I've seen investors with high-risk portfolios panic during the financial crisis in 2008 or the COVID crash in 2020 and sell everything when the market dropped 30%. Those same people watched from the sidelines as the market hit new highs and always found a reason not to get back in. So let's get into part 2 of the 5-part portfolio test. Style box concentration. Is your portfolio all in large cap growth? Do you have exposure to both growth and value? Do you have exposure to mid cap and small cap? If you have everything in the S&P 500, you most likely are very concentrated in large cap growth because it's a market cap weighted index. If you haven't watched my episode called Could the Next 10 Years Make or Break Your Retirement, I would encourage you to do so. The link is above or will be available at the end of this episode. A complete portfolio should have exposure to all the areas of the market. Morningstar puts out what's called a style box. It has 9 different boxes for equities: large cap, mid cap, and small cap, value, blend, and growth. Do you know where all your money is? That's what a portfolio analysis will show you. Now let's move on to part 3 of the 5-part portfolio test. Investing in the rear view and thinking this time is different. Now this is more of a reality check. Are you expecting above average returns the next 10 years because your portfolio has done so well the past 5? If you have everything in the S&P 500, you've done extremely well, and you've outperformed about 90% of the active mutual funds on the market. Now, the S&P has averaged about 13.6% the last 5 years, about 11.3% for the last 10 years, and about 8.4% for the last 20 years. So the average is closer to 10%. But the S&P was up about 24% in 2023 and about 23% in 2024. And so far in 2025, as this episode comes out, it's up about 14%. Hardly average, not normal. The S&P 500 is very concentrated in large cap growth, with the top 20 holdings of the S&P 500 making up nearly 40% of the index. For an index with 500 companies, that seems riskier than normal. Here's a short history lesson for you. When you look at over 90 years of history for the S&P 500, how many times do you think it made the average return of 10.3%? I'm not going to answer that, but the number is very low. I would love if you answered that in the comments below. And then when you look at how many times the S&P was between 10 to 15%, it was 9 times in 90 years. 15 and 20%, about 12 times. And it was above 20% over 38 times over 90 years. On the other side of the spectrum, it was between 5 to 10%, 8 times. It was between 0 to 5% average return, 6 times. And less than 0%, 26 times the S&P was below 0% over the last 90 years. And we sometimes forget that. The markets don't always go up. We sometimes forget the S&P 500 from 2000 to 2009, a lost decade. Negative 1.2% return. That means if you had $1 million in 2000, it would be worth about $874,000 9 years later. Now, I'm not predicting another lost decade or financial crisis, but it's time to be cautious. It's time to consider rebalancing. It's time to be proactive and create the best portfolio for your situation right now. Not looking in the rear view, but looking at what type of portfolio can help you reach your long-term goals. Now let's move on to part 4 of the 5-part portfolio test. Expense ratios. These are the silent wealth killers. Here's that costly mistake I mentioned earlier in the episode. The average actively managed mutual fund charges about 0.8% in fees, and many even higher. So let's do the math. On a $100,000 portfolio growing at 7% annually, that 0.8% fee costs you about $127,000 over 30 years, compared to a low-cost index fund charging 0.05%. But here's what's really the problem. Most people don't even know what they're paying. I've reviewed portfolios where people were paying over 2% in total fees between management fees, fund expenses, and hidden costs. So here's your expense audit checklist. Mutual fund or ETF expense ratio should be under 0.3% for domestic funds. International funds and ETFs can go up to 0.5%, but there are plenty of total international market ETFs well below 0.15%. Bond funds or ETFs should be under 0.25%. Any fund charging over 1% better be generating some alpha or extra returns. But the truth, 90+% of them don't. In just a few minutes, I'll reveal the GPA rating system that instantly shows whether your portfolio is optimized or if you're leaving some money on the table. And I'm wondering, have you ever looked at your investment fees? Drop a comment and let me know whether you buy actively managed funds or ETFs and what percentage you're paying. They may be higher than you think. So this leads me to wealth decision principle number 2. Fees are guaranteed. Returns are not. Every dollar you pay in unnecessary fees is a dollar that can't compound for your future. Now, while you can't control market returns, you have complete control over fees. This leads me to part 5 of the 5-part portfolio test. Now, just like in school, your portfolio gets a grade. The GPA rating from Riskalyze is a score from 1.0 to 4.3 that measures an investment's efficiency by looking at the relationship between expected return and downside risk over a 6-month period. A higher GPA indicates a more efficient investment, showing better expected performance for the amount of risk taken. The tool helps show clients how one portfolio might be a better choice than another, even if they have a similar risk number. Here's the grading scale. An A grade would be 4.0 to 4.3. Your portfolio passes the test and there's no changes needed. A B grade would be 3.0 to 3.9. Some minor adjustments might be needed. A C grade would be 2.0 to 2.9, which is a lower score. Some improvements definitely should be made. And a D or F grade is anything below 2.0. There's a complete overall that's required for your portfolio. I recently reviewed a portfolio with a 2.9 GPA. The investor had a moderate risk tolerance and a risk number score of 55. But their portfolio had a risk number of 78, and they had a lot of overlap in actively managed funds with high fees. We're able to show him how to get his GPA up to 4.0 and lower his fees and increase his upside and downside protection. Now stay with me because I'm about to give you the exact action steps to optimize your portfolio and give you access to my Riskalyze system to get your risk number score. But before we get into that, let's talk about wealth decision principle number 3. Alignment beats performance every single time. A perfectly aligned portfolio that matches your risk tolerance will always outperform the high-flying investment that makes you lose sleep. Why? Because you'll actually stick with it through all market cycles. Remember Robert from earlier? After getting his risk number and adjusting his portfolio, he was not only sleeping better, but his investment returns improved because he stopped making emotional decisions and had a better, more complete portfolio for his stage of life and risk tolerance. So before we end the episode, here's your 5-minute portfolio checkup challenge. Number 1, get your risk number. Go to the Riskalyze in the description of my podcast to get a free risk number assessment. You can also find the link in a pinned comment in this episode. Number 2, audit your expenses. Log into your investment accounts and write down every expense ratio. Add them up. If your total is over 0.5%, you possibly need to make some changes. Number 3, get your portfolio GPA score. If you would like to get your GPA score, comment GPA score in the comments below. And number 4, the alignment test. Does your portfolio's risk level match your risk number within 10 points? If not, you need to possibly rebalance. So here's a quick implementation guide. If you have high risk tolerance but high fees, switch to low-cost index funds. If you have low risk tolerance but high portfolio risk, add bonds and stable investments. If you have a low GPA score, consider working with a fee-based fiduciary advisor to help you build a better portfolio aligned with your goals and risk tolerance and help you create a solid financial plan. And reply to my pinned comment below where I ask, what's your biggest concerns with your portfolio or the markets right now? In that pinned comment, you'll find the link to get your risk number score. The 5-part test is fairly simple, but very powerful. Know your true risk tolerance, minimize expenses, and ensure your portfolio is aligned with your goals and gets an A grade. Your money deserves the best. Most investors fail this test because they're guessing instead of measuring. They're following generic advice instead of creating a personalized strategy. Your future wealth depends on getting your portfolio right. And now you have a roadmap. If this episode helped you see your portfolio a little differently, push the like button and subscribe for more wealth building strategies in the future. And I would love if you shared this episode with someone who might need to hear it. And always remember, your wealth decisions today determine your financial freedom tomorrow. This is Brian, the Wealth Decisions Guy, and I hope to see you next week.